What's up, guys? Welcome back to a new video here. And we had a crazy one over the past few days. Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan had a sit-down interview where they had a heated, and I mean heated debate. We're going to show you clips of that, and we're going to break it all down. So they had a number of specific debates on Israel, for example, which is a major storyline coming out of this, on specifically the issue of Russia, Ukraine. Tucker Carlson, I mean, you got to really wonder what's going on there. He is firmly in support of the Russian position in Ukraine, and he admits as such in this interview. And it was pretty interesting because they had two separate interviews, and overall it was like 2 hours long, one on Piers Morgan's show, one on Tucker Carlson's show. And I'm just going to show you basically the biggest moments of both of those interviews combined. So let's get right into it. And again, guys, make sure if you're liking the content, make sure to like and subscribe. It's super good for the algorithm. And if you want to support the channel, my Patreon link is in the description as well. So take a look at that. So the first major dispute of this interview, guys, was basically Tucker Carlson starts it off by saying, hey, you call Zelenskyy a hero. The president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelenskyy, you call him a hero. I think that's insane. So what's up with that? And let's just show you the clip, guys, and we'll get right into it. Here's the first clip, guys.
I'm not that interested, actually. Not really. It's not my country. I'm interested in my leaders, whether, they have the consent of their people. It's not of great interest to me. Whether, I do think Putin's like way more popular than, Joe Biden.
To his people.
Yes, more popular in Russia than Biden was ever popular.
I wouldn't dispute that. But why are you so against Zelenskyy?
No, I'm just trying to understand when you dismiss Putin as a dictator, which totally fair, I guess, but I'm just trying to understand what you mean by dictator. So the first criterion for dictatorship is that you're not elected. And what else? Because Zelensky's obviously not elected either.
Yeah,
So I'm just trying to kind of figure out what you're talking about.
Well, your comparison with Zelenskyy and Putin over the last 2 years, I found baffling. Because you seem to think there's some moral equivalence between the two. And Zelenskyy hasn't illegally invaded another country. Do you not have a problem with what Putin's done?
Hold on. I just want to know what a dictator is. I just want to know. I mean, maybe he's a better guy than Putin or whatever, and you could say some things about one or nothing. But like, if we're just going to define dictator, the first feature of a dictator is he's not elected. So Zelensky's not elected. He's also, he's banned a religious denomination. He's murdered his political opponents. He has banned a language group. Those all seem like features of dictatorship to me. Now, he has the support of the British intelligence agencies. That doesn't mean he's not a dictator, though. That sounds like a dictator. I mean, if I just gave you a piece of paper and I'm like, here are some qualities of a European leader, you would say, well, that's not legitimate. That guy's a dictator. I can't support that. But his name's Zelenskyy, and he was once a comedian, and he does my show, so he's not a dictator. I think it's a dictator.
Well, I would argue that if you look at the history of Ukraine since the 90s, since it became a, for want of a better phrase, democratic country, as they would say, well, I mean, by the same criteria you support Putin being popular in his country, I think just under 90% of Ukrainians voted for it. You wouldn't dispute that.
Well, first of all, the country had a coup sponsored by the United States government, the CIA, in 2014. So everything that happened subsequent to that, I don't think we could call part of the democratic process. But just Zelenskyy personally is not elected. He's not an elected leader. He rules by force. There's no election that gives him legitimacy. So that's not a defense of Putin. It's merely an attack on the idea that Putin's the only dictator in this contest. How is Zelenskyy not a dictator?
Do you think Putin's a dictator?
I guess, yeah. I mean, if I stand up outside the Kremlin and say, down with Vladimir Putin, I'm probably in trouble. That's why I don't live in Russia.
Right. I certainly think that Ukraine has had a lot of corruption.
No, but is Zelenskyy legitimate? How is he legitimate if he's not elected? Well, how could you support an unelected leader?
Well, he's the president of the country.
Well, he calls himself that, but there's no election that made him president. He blew past the election and said, oh, there's a war. We can't have an election. We're going to change the Constitution. So how is that a legitimate leader? How could you support something like that? That seems, I don't know, like a dictatorship.
Well, I would categorize my support for him as supporting him against an illegal invasion.
Okay, so what we're seeing Tucker do, guys, is he's trying to draw a comparison between Zelenskyy and Putin, basically trying to say they're both the same, they're both dictators, which is just not true. It's just not true. Comparing what Vladimir Zelensky's position in Ukraine to Vladimir Putin's position in Russia, it's ridiculous. And he claims ridiculously that there was no elections in Ukraine. That's not true. Zelenskyy was democratically elected. What happened was that since the war, martial law was declared. The country is under invasion, guys, so the military is in control. Obviously, you cannot hold an election as there is a war going on. And there will be elections, according to the Lex Friedman interview. Vladimir Zelenskyy said there will be elections in the near future. And what Tucker is saying, how Zelenskyy is not popular, that is really not true. According to most polling, he is very popular. And you can say, you know what, that might not be accurate. But in the same interview, Tucker is claiming that, oh, Putin's pretty popular based on polling. So what exactly is going on here? It's really strange how almost every single Russian position Tucker is basically in agreement with. And the funny thing is, they're both debating dictatorships. Both of them are sitting down in Saudi Arabia, which is pretty ironic when you think about it. But okay. And again, he dismisses Putin as a dictator. Again, saying, what is a dictator really? Again, just asking these questions, which a lot of these people do, trying to basically say, listen, his entire goal of this is to make it seem like Putin's not all that bad, which I don't agree with. You cannot illegally invade a foreign country. And then they get into a dispute basically saying Putin is basically correct. There's no question the Russian line about we invaded Ukraine because of NATO encroachment. And you know what? Is it true that that could possibly have had a role in this? There's no question about it. But the idea that this is the only reason why, it's not true. If you listen to Vladimir Putin's speech on the night of the Ukrainian invasion, he is talking about Soviet restoration and bring back the glory of the Soviet Union. This is a speech he gave on the night of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So the idea that this is only because of NATO encroachment, it's ridiculous. And I don't think anyone seriously really believed that the Ukrainians were going to invade Russia. That was not going to happen. I don't buy it at all. And it's just very strange how that is the line he does. And you know, Tucker is basically grilling Piers saying, oh, you love Zelenskyy so much. I actually do think it's pretty admirable that when the Russians were invading Ukraine, when people thought the country would fall in a matter of days, he actually stayed in the country. He did not flee the country. I actually think that is pretty heroic and admirable, which Tucker doesn't seem to think. He's a dictator. Tucker claims that he kills his political opponents and assassinations. Again, trying to say it's the same thing Putin does. It's not true at all. It's just not. And that's not to say there's not corruption in Ukraine, but it's a total false comparison. And again, the issue also is, you know, he rips Piers for this, saying he does a softball interview with Zelenskyy. Tucker, you had a chance to grill Vladimir Putin. You didn't do that at all. It was a total softball interview with Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov, for example, when you had him on a couple of weeks ago as well, when you went to Moscow again. Again, he's fawning over Moscow as well, saying Moscow's amazing. It really is legitimately strange. And the thing that's crazy, guys, is a lot of the arguments Tucker makes, specifically on foreign policy, it's quite Marxist. It's quite Marxist and quite very leftist. You would think a leftist would be saying this, for example. Like some of the argument, it's pretty wild that this is the position he's taking. I mean, he brings up Hiroshima and Nagasaki as well, claiming as though that, hey, you know, this was evil, which I tend to agree with. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were certainly not in accordance with international law. But the fact that he's making these arguments, they come from a relatively left-wing perspective on the issue of foreign policy, which is pretty interesting. You know, the Ukraine issue notwithstanding, but just in general on foreign policy, it is quite interesting. And again, he brings up, for example, this is where it just gets, okay, come on now. Like, what are we doing here, Tucker? Saying we should abolish NATO, saying there's no purpose for it, which, you know, I just think that's completely ridiculous. Saying you want to abolish NATO, and he basically says the Russians should have been in NATO. The Russians should be in NATO. They're invading all these foreign countries. What are you talking about? Again, just total Russian talking points. And then probably another crazy major headline of the interview, he claims that when NATO intervened in Yugoslavia in the 90s, where basically you had these Yugoslavians raping and pillaging these cities, he basically caught that up to NATO killing Christians. Again, just total misinformation or disinformation coming from Tucker, and I really don't understand what his motivation is for this. It's legitimately strange. Even on the issue of China, he says, why should we have any involvement in China? Taiwan is a part of China. That, again, extremely wild that he's saying this. Like, this is total, like, the fact that a so-called Republican is saying this, it's not in the green at all with what you would think he's saying. And again, I thought Piers actually has a really good line of questioning here when he brings up to Tucker, for example, okay, you say you're a so-called isolationist and you don't agree with this. What about the U.S. funding Israel? And this also made major, major headlines when he asked him, like, do you support Israel? And, you know, Tucker was kind of dodging for a while, but then he finally conceded, no, I actually think what Israel is doing is terrible, it's wrong, and people like Ben Shapiro are evil for promoting it. Pretty wild stuff. Here's the clip, guys, and we'll talk about it after.
You probably shouldn't beat your chest and brag about it. You know, maybe you can make the
I agree with that.
Maybe you make the case that we had to do it or whatever, but you should.
I agree.
You should weep, and that's evil, and you should just say it's evil. And I know it's really threatening to.
Is it evil, though?
Ben Shapiro to say that or whatever, but
Is it evil?
to kill civilians on purpose? Yeah, it is. I think it is.
Really?
Kids and children. Well, how is it not actually?
In a war?
Well, you can call it whatever you want. How is it right to kill women and children?
I didn't say, well, because I think there is a moral right behind you if you are literally.
To kill women and children?
If there's a world war that threatens the entire world, Yes.
Some people killed your kids, like your 8-year-old. Like,
Well, obviously,
how
your
is
own
that
children,
morally justifiable?
Well, because actually you have to. Well, by your criteria,
it's disgusting.
Okay, it's nothing's so no war is morally justified.
I mean, I think it's pretty hard to justify. I mean, yeah, I'm
Any
sure,
war.
A pure defensive action, sure. But all I'm saying, look, it's all ugly. It's all hard to stomach. I've actually seen some of it up close. It's super ugly.
You can say that. You can say you hate it.
May I finish?
The fact you quibble with it being morally justified.
To intentionally kill non-combatants, women and children, I think we can say that's wrong. In fact, I thought that was the thing we were fighting against.
But this just...
And listen, guys, I tend to agree in the sense, yeah, I actually think it is pretty horrible to kill deliberately women and civilians as what has happened here in the Gaza Strip over the past few months. There's no question, and I actually agree with a lot of Tucker's points when he's articulating that. And even if you agree with it, I do agree with the beating their chest over it, which we've seen many people like Ben Shapiro do. It's wrong. I think that is wrong, and it's not right at all for these people to be doing that. And I agree with Tucker on that point. And by the way, and Tucker basically says, "Oh, you love Israel," to Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan, to his credit, has actually platformed a number of Palestinian voices. So I don't agree at all with the position that Tucker is smearing Piers here. Piers has been pretty reasonable on the issue, I think, in my opinion, since the beginning of the conflict. Again, it's pretty wild, but it's not just that. We see that, and the way he frames the issue, though, guys, which I take exception to, he frames the issue as Israel killing Christians. That's how he frames the entire issue, which, of course, it's an interesting framing. It's far bigger than that. It's not that specific frame which Tucker is discussing. Most of his conflicts also, and take into account, guys, a lot of people have thrown the anti-Semitism card at Tucker. Take into account Zelenskyy is Jewish. Does that have a role in it? You never know. Who knows with Tucker? I really don't know. And then we talk about World War II, which was another heated part, which I completely disagree with Tucker Carlson. I thought Piers destroyed him on this point and dog-walked him, where he basically says, did we really win World War II? He basically says that, you know what, the Russians making an alliance with Stalin was just as bad as doing it with Hitler. Why would we make an alliance with Stalin, who's an evil murderer, and not ally with... he kind of implies like we should not have gotten involved. He basically implies that. He's total revisionist history. He says Stalin was a warmonger. I mean, just warmonger, and we did not need to go to war, which is totally not true. The Nazis were basically about to invade Britain already when Churchill came in office. So that, again, just total revisionist history on that point. We'll just show the clip and we'll talk about it after. Here's a clip, guys.
I'm very distressed about it. So people want to tell me Churchill's an incredible guy. Really? Well, why didn't he save Western civilization? He didn't even save Poland.
He did.
What did he?
He did save Western civilization.
How?
He defeated the Nazis.
But I know he helped defeat the Nazis,
Well, the Nazis
with his friend Stalin.
The Nazis wanted the whole world to be speaking
I'm
German.
not defending the Nazis. I'm just saying, where is Western civilization? What did he preserve? Where is it? I don't know where it is.
Churchill died the year before I was born. Oh, the same year, actually.
He died in 63, I think.
65.
65.
I think about a month before I was born. It was a natural succession. But the
but the question is, like, where's the victory? I don't understand. Like, everyone wants to yell at you for not loving Churchill. Okay,
well, hang on,
show me the victory.
Well, yeah, but
it's a theoretical victory.
Why do you support?
Okay, I mean, on this point, I completely disagree. I think Tucker is totally off. I mean, you got to be kidding me to say that we didn't. What victory are you talking about? It's just so insane. Like, what do you defeated the Nazi Germany? What are we even talking about? You're not speaking German. Yeah, that is why we have won the war. Like, it's just so insane to me. And then you have people like Tucker, who basically blame Churchill for what's going on in Great Britain now. Like, that makes it's like blaming George Washington for the Civil War. It makes no sense. Like, it's totally insane. I ask again, what are Tucker's motivations for this? Because again, Tucker's a smart guy. He knows what he's articulating. Why is he articulating this way? It's quite strange. I think Piers, kind of the alarm bells are going off. I'm very curious to see what Piers has to say about this interview. I really am, because it was very strange on the World War II point in particular, basically justifying, like, flirting a little bit with a lot of the far right here. Like saying we shouldn't have done an alliance with Russia. And by the way, the reason why we did an alliance with the Soviet Union was because Nazi Germany was expansionist and was looking to expand their borders and invade all of Europe and the United States afterwards. So what are we even talking about here? And Germany declared war on the United States first, just to be clear. So the idea that Tucker basically thinks, no, we shouldn't have gotten involved in any of this. Churchill is a bad guy. And he basically that's the thing, guys. He says Hitler is bad, but he almost makes it seem like Churchill is worse than Hitler. That he basically does that. And again, this is very deliberate. And you have to ask the question, why is he doing this? A lot of revisionist history as well. That's not true. The way he frames a lot of these issues is just totally inaccurate. And Piers calls him out for it. And hey, good for Piers. I thought Piers conducted himself very well for the most part in this interview. So just very wild stuff. I'm very curious what you guys think. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you saw the full episode, I mean, I thought it was super interesting on a number of topics, specifically the Israel Ben Shapiro thing. That's going to be a huge viral thing out of this, but also the Ukraine issue in particular. I thought Tucker just very Russian. Again, I got to be honest. A lot of the talking points of the Russians he agrees with. Why is that? I don't know. There's no. It's not a mystery why the Russians have in Tucker whenever he comes to Moscow. It's not, or the Russian government. It's not a question. I mean, it's just very strange to me. I'm curious what you guys think about it. Let me know in the comments. Again, make sure to like and subscribe. It's super good for the algorithm. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks.